David is the founder and developer of the Development Center for Appropriate Technology. Again, one of those titles that was 40 years ago quite avant-garde and now is what everybody is wanting to learn about, and it's appropriate technology. He's also a member of our board. So thank you, David.
Thank you, Stuart. So Penelys and I met sometime before 2006, but I'm not sure exactly when. Neither one of us actually remembers how that came about, but I know for sure that we had met before that because we did a little work together on a little project in Carbondale, Colorado in 2006, and we already knew each other then. And that was a little straw bale workshop, and Penelys has been involved in natural building and a whole lot more than that. She and I also did a little work together for EPA in their tribal green building and building code program that we helped them develop a website and a toolkit to go along with it, and a lot of other things. And Penelys has been involved in sustainable nations. I'm actually going to let Penelys tell you about the things that she's been involved with. She has a beautiful family, and I know she spent part of the summer in Wisconsin. Was it Wisconsin? And I saw a lot of amazing pictures from her time there on Facebook. But anyway, Penelys Droz, it's all yours.
Thanks. It's an absolute honor to be introduced by you, David. You are just an incredible, powerful mentor and accomplice in the movement. So thank you so much. Yeah, Ani, manawagijagad everybody. My name is Penelys Droz. My family is actually Anishinaabe. My mom is Anishinaabe. My dad is mixed European. Not quite sure all the details on that side, but I was raised to be Anishinaabe, which is a tribe from the other border, over on the border of Ontario and Michigan. I was raised in a little Yurok rancheria. A rancheria is like a little mini reservation that was established under a different political act. And I feel very grateful to be living in Bonatham land and have been serving some really beautiful work and partnerships here. With just incredibly badass Bonatham people that have, yeah, just have such profound understanding of how to caretake their desert. So shall I just dive right in? Am I up? All right, I'm gonna screen share. I'm really looking forward to meeting each one of you. And I see some familiar faces, so hey. All right, whoa, there we go. I have a presentation for y'all. One thing I wanna share a little bit also is that, it's taking a while to load. Is that I come to my work, I come to this sort of life purpose and work from, I'm having some technical difficulties, so I'm gonna stop my screen share. I'm gonna shut down my billion windows real quick, and then I'm gonna try to open it back up again. I started my work based in just sort of like based in ecological trauma. So the community that I was raised in which was, not my indigenous community, but was the indigenous community I was raised to be a part of, experienced the kill of 200,000 of our salmon because of Klamath dams, clear cutting, logging, mining, creating Superfund sites, sort of all of that kind of stuff. And so I sort of dove in feet first into the indigenous environmental justice movement, and worked for Indigenous Environmental Network, and doing a lot of that resistance work. But part of resistance, you can't have only resistance. You also have to build the creative alternatives. And a lot of the times I saw, and this, I'm going to speak from my youthful self. As a teenager, I felt like a lot of the times our community struggles, were not that our people lost so much, but that we still kept our values. We still kept our knowledge of our responsibility to our homelands. We still kept our knowledge of our responsibility to one another, and kept our values. But there was a sense of hopelessness. And how do you live those things in this time? How do you do that? How do you recover from our history? And so we started an organization, Sustainable Nations, to provide grassroots training, professional consulting in renewable energy, natural building, ecological wastewater treatment, food sovereignty programming, and to serve that work to really rebuild our nations from the foundation of our values. And that work has sort of evolved and shifted. We're shifting into becoming an Indigenous design collective to be able to continue to offer that work, because I stepped into some exciting, fun work with the Indian Collective. So check us out at Indian Collective, ndncollective.org. You can still check out Sustainable Nations. Our website's going to go through a little overhaul pretty quick here, but it's still the old one. And yeah, this is an old adobe house. I live in Barrio Libre, South Tucson, in an urban Yaqui community, in the house that my husband was able to buy way before I met him. So to just start this talk off, I wanted to share this quote. If anybody has heard of Leanne Simpson, Leanne Simpson is from my tribe. She's another Anishinaabe Koi. She is a beautiful author. I'll drop her name in the chat in a little bit, because I highly recommend that folks read her work. She was doing interviews of Anishinaabe elders, and asked an elder man about the concept of sustainable development. And this was his quote that I wanted to share. The concept is backwards. You don't develop as much as Mother Earth can handle. You think about how much you can give up to promote more life. Every decision that you make is based on, do you really need to be doing that? So I think that is a good framework. I also wanted to toss this in here because I think it's funny. Before we get into more specific content. I am a science person. My bachelor's started off being in physics. I have always been utterly fascinated by the way that science, as the study of creation, aligns so deeply and profoundly with our cosmologies and cultural principles. So and it just keeps on continuing to do, to align more and more as science catches up. So let's get in. So this is a question I ask folks a lot of the time. I always like to share that our world is designed, right? So our governments are designed, our social systems are designed. Of course, our food and water and other infrastructure is all designed. So when I'm talking about design, I'm not just talking about architecture or housing or something like that. I'm talking about everything. And a definition of design is the intentional shaping of matter, energy, and process to fit a perceived need or desire. So design inherently connects culture to creation, right? Design inherently connects culture to creation. And one of my, someone I've never had the honor of meeting, but who really was a gift when I was reading his work when I was young, was this man named Sim van der Rin. He wrote a beautiful book about ecological design. My graduate school background's in environmental engineering and all that fun stuff. And let me know if my kids are too loud and I'll try to move, but just, yeah. And his quote was, "Design manifests culture, and culture rests firmly on the foundation of what we believe to be true about the world." So if everybody has access to your chat, and to preface this a little bit, to preface this question, let me just say that I have a firm belief that colonial cultures were the least in number of the cultures of the world, based on my past work where I got to engage with indigenous folks from Europe and Africa and the Americas, meeting folks from indigenous nations all over the place. They did not share these same aspects of these very few colonial cultures that have impacted the world so immensely. So what can we imagine the colonial cultures of the world believed was true about the world? What can we imagine the colonial cultures believed was true about the world? So if y'all could drop in the chat, I can call out your answers if you're comfortable dropping it in the chat. Now everyone's kicked back from their screens. The entitlement to the land and people. The world was given to them to use as they saw to benefit for themselves. That everything's for the taking. They were destined to inhabit the empty spaces. That's so funny. The world is a source of materials, property, and riches to be exploited by all who could. Yeah. People that know how to use stuff deserve to make all decisions. Depends on what you think about what using stuff means, but yeah, no, I get you. I oftentimes selfish. Okay, great. Thanks, Stuart. If it gets wild, let me know. A lot of the times I also I'll tell my kids, my older kids, and they were asking a lot of these questions, like, why are all these wild decisions being made about the world? You know, I let them know, like, fellas, so many people in the world have forgotten that the earth is alive. So many people have forgotten that they exist in a living world, you know, and you know, and again, you know, Europe colonized itself before it came over here, right? And so many of our peoples have been removed from our earth-based traditions by the colonial forces. How do these values, here's another thing to drop into the chat. How do these beliefs and values show up in how we obtain food, water, and shelter? How do they show up in our social interactions, economies, extractive processes? Absolutely. Destruction of biodiversity. You have to have money to get anything. Cultivation of arid lands. Take. Like there's infinite, like there's infinity out there, huh? Land belongs to the ones who own it. No, absolutely. yeah, and the folks, well, the more concentrative of wealth, the more efficient. God will make more. Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, the removal of people from the impacts of their decisions, the removal of people with more resources from the impacts of their decisions, as well, as I'd like to throw that in there. And we can just, we can walk around and look at our transportation systems. We can look at the way our homes are designed. We can look at the way our cities are designed and see this sort of emphasis on the individual, this lack of emphasis on community connectivity, this lack of emphasis on being connected to that which gives you life. So I invite you to just pay attention and sort of interrogate the different ways that colonial values permeate all of our minds and all of our lives. It's important for all of us, no matter what your background, to really interrogate that. So bringing it to indigenous specific issues initially. So our nations went through, there's various forms of colonialism, right? And actually, this isn't even an indigenous specific issue. Gosh, there's various forms of colonialism. So, an initial form of colonialism is the physical colonization, the occupation, the genocide, the literal land theft. Then a next stage to get folks subjugated is economic colonization. You got to remove people's ability to take care of themselves. You got to destroy the traditional economy, or diminish it in every way you can. One thing I always like to remind folks is that there were and still kind of is an undercurrent of interconnected indigenous economies across the land. Whatever land you go, there were or are deeply interconnected indigenous economies at work. When settlers were coming over here, it was a very intentional thing to destroy the people's ability to provide for themselves. So George Washington famously burned Haudenosaunee seed houses, for example. Sent his folks across and had them burn all the seed houses. Hopefully you've seen the big piles of buffalo skulls on the plains when it was US policy to starve out the plains natives. In California, folks were, settlers were encouraged to burn the oak forests and try to destroy, California natives' ability to feed themselves. And so the creation of dependent indigenous nations was very intentional. And that's one of the things that we're working on getting beyond all of these things today. Emotional and psychological colonization is next, and spiritual colonization. In Canada and the US, that was enforced particularly insidiously through the boarding schools and the residential schools, where, a lot of our grandparents, this is not that long ago, there's some of our grandparents were part of that boarding school and residential school experience. I'm actually really grateful that even though it's horrifying, I'm really, really grateful that the word is getting out now, and that all of those babies that were buried at the schools, people are starting to tell their stories. Deb Holland is sort of leading the charge to look for the graves that are going to be at all of the boarding schools here in the US as well, because that's something that people haven't known about that outside of our communities, unless you take a Native American Studies class or something. And I think it's really important we should all know each other's histories. And so I'd also encourage us all, as we move forward in the world, to watch because colonial cultures and systems still utilize all of these practices to create dependency and to subjugate others continuously in the world. So we need to be paying attention and support as we can, right? So I wanted to bring this little picture in because it is, I discovered it, it was a piece of resistance to the British enclosure movement that happened between like the 16th and 18th or 19th centuries, 16th and 18th centuries. Britain decided it wanted to remove all commonly held land, right, and start creating really, creating really intense private property. So, so capitalism, here we go, on a whole other level. And so, you know, these colonial values and the systems that have accompanied them, private property, land dispossession, globalized extractive capitalism, and climate injustice and climate change are the results of a people who have been so far removed from the earth that this is how they behave now. It really is quite sad, right? And so our task is immense, and it is to undo these destructive systems, and undo them through the leadership of those who are dispossessed and marginalized, particularly BIPOC folks, Black, Indigenous, and people of color folks. You know, racialized systems of oppression have been being put to use for many generations now, and there's a great start to beginning to undo these systems. I'm going to bring us back to the fact that these things have gotten so out of whack because the people making the decisions don't feel the impact of their decision making. There is zero accountability. There's zero personal relationship. There's zero personal connection. And so those personal connections and those circles have to be recreated. And through putting the folks in leadership and following them with open ears and open minds and open hearts, that is an incredibly powerful way to undo the destruction. You know, I love Albert Einstein's quote, you can't use the same thinking. So who knows that quote? You can't use the same thinking you can't solve the problems. Catch me here, y'all. Who knows that quote?
Well, it's not clear whether it was from Einstein actually, but it's something effective. You can't solve a problem with the same thinking that created.
Yay. No, I know I was seeing that somebody was like, maybe that's not really Einstein. Who was it? But anyway, whoever it was brilliant. So onwards. Before I get into what some version of sustainability looks like for Indigenous folks, I can't do that without talking about land back. I am thrilled to be living in the era of land back that we can actually say this out loud. And we're going to circle back around to this at the end here. I just wanted to share with everybody that land back is a movement that's been going on since the first resistors to colonization. So this, of course, this isn't new, but we're newly talking about it in broader terms these days. And it's a movement to restore land to the care of Indigenous people. So yes, it does mean actual land return, and that is happening more and more and more. It's incredible. It is also the extension of Indigenous care and governance to lands that are not able to be given back. This is also happening more and more and more. And if anybody wants details on any of this, catch me later. Catch me, you know, email me or give me a call. I love to share these stories. It also necessarily includes reparations and land for Black folks as well, while we're talking about it. And it necessitates an avenue for justice through centering our knowledge, like I've been talking about, experience, and creating a path for us to guide solutions, including regenerative design and development. There's a lot of, I haven't spoken in front of a non-Indigenous audience in kind of a long time. And so I am happy to field questions both after and after, personally. As a mixed ethnic woman, I feel my role in that way. So actualizing land back, what are some of the cool ways this has been happening? Really amazing circumstances of land return. We have amazing folks and amazing organizations out there that have been partnering to assist in the buyback of ancestral homelands. We have amazing folks out there who have been supporting us with the privilege and political clout it takes to establish true co-governance. Big deal, true co-governance and cultural easements on lands that cannot be given back. Happy to talk to anybody about the nitty-gritty details of all this as well. And partnering with us to support Indigenous-led community land trusts and conservancies. So you may or may not know that historically land trusts and conservancies have had a bad name in the Native community because they have been historically used to keep us out and to preserve some kind of imaginary wilderness that never existed usually. And so, but there are ways of utilizing those amazing tools to achieve land back and true, beautiful inter-ethnic, intercultural partnerships for a healed world that I've been really amazed by. One example I'd encourage you to look up is the Wiyot tribe of Northern California. The Wiyot tribe did, nice quote, the Wiyot tribe has established a community land trust to do culturally based regenerative community development in partnership with the non-native organization Cooperation Humboldt, which is a solidarity economy organization in the region. I just got the honor of being able to write an article about them for Yes, and they their place-based healing justice model for building co-powered alliances to build this new world with Cooperation Humboldt and the regional allies has just been really beautiful to learn more about. So what's our track forward? I do this work a lot with other Native communities that are seeking pathways forward to develop their nation's economies, infrastructures, land governance systems, and some of what the work that I've done has been to help facilitate that, to facilitate the bringing out of people's own knowledge, and in the service of this Indigenous design practice. So Indigenous design is design that regenerates the spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical health of people and the land together. How do we do it? All of you designers know this question really well. You have to start with values. This is the question that we always start with is, what are the values that make you who you are as a people? That is the question that we ask ourselves as Indigenous people that all have different intersections with colonial culture. Some of us practice our traditional cultures and cosmologies. Some of us are Christian, some of us are Catholic, some of us are, we're so broadly diverse. yet the values that we are able to identify remain powerfully linked into the land, powerfully linked into our land-based community knowledge, and powerfully linked to regenerative principles and practices that can serve our nations. This is something that we can do as interethnic, intercultural groups of people seeking to build regenerative worlds, right? We have to establish our fundamental, commonly shared values. We're in this interesting situation where we're going to be having to do some massive heavy lifting to overturn these wildly destructive systems, and in wildly diverse cultural society. So how do we do that when we don't all pray in the same way together? Well, let's identify the values that make us who we are as a people that we can share and lean on when we're fighting. Hey. So indigenous perspectives on sustainability, it is so broad because there's as many ideas and perspectives as indigenous people, let alone indigenous cultures, right? And so I am going to be so bold as to share with you, and I struggled with this for a minute, and then I came to the realization that I will, let's have this conversation here. I've shared this content all with extremely mixed indigenous teams of people working together, and with good reception for over a decade now. So here we go. So speaking of, I'm going to share with you what I can share from an Anishinaabe perspective. From an Anishinaabe perspective, who has also intersected really deeply with lots of other indigenous people and cultures, and have done a lot of that work. So across cultures, indigenous stories and creation stories often teach that everything is relational. Everything is relational. Everything is a living expression of the creator. Really briefly, I will share that the way that I see the creation as an Anishinaabe person is that we are all a song being sung by the creator. So we are all a dream song being sung because the creator had a dream and is singing us into existence in an ever-changing, completely living song. When I was taught this story, I was told to put my hand in front of my mouth and to feel that vibration and be like, yep, see, it's just like that. It's just like that vibration, right? And so the thing that separates me from you, from anything else in creation, it's all the relationships of the patterns of the vibration is what makes reality, right? So now you can see why I really fell in love with physics. But that sort of common understanding is shared. And our purpose is to live so that our lives cause more harmony and less discord. That's a shared principle of value. Our cultures also share the value and the understanding that the land is everything. The land is everything. When we talk about the land, we're not just talking about soil, we're talking also about the elements and the plants and the animal, all of Mother Earth's babies, right? And the spirits and the different elements that live within the land as a whole. The land encodes knowledge. The land holds our histories. The land holds memory of everything that has happened in every location at every time. The land recognizes you just like you recognize the land. The plants around you recognize you just like you recognize them. Stories are in the land. The ultimate source of knowledge is with the land and the spirits and the creator, and it's coded with knowledge through time. Also science principles here. Baba can tie your shoe. So one of our roles as humans is to care for and keep the land in a continuous state of regeneration. And the way that we do this is by mirroring the processes, patterns, and flow of creation as the ultimate source of knowledge. Down to the very nitty, like little bitty little things. I always think about this. A mentor of mine that taught me how to beadwork is important for our culture. And the woman who taught me how to bead, one of my mentors, you're supposed to try work, imperfectly at all times, but to work to guide your life in the image of creation all the time. That's what we strive to do all the time. To where she saw me beading, and I had separated out the different colors so that I could more quickly get them into the design. And she said, don't do that. She said, life's not like that. Life's not like that. Mix those beads up. You have to you have to select and pick out the beauty you want and to create what you're doing out of the chaos. You have to find the pieces in the chaos and to create what you're making. That's how you do it. That's what's important, right? So even down to that scale. There's also this feeling, in our culture, like everything has a purpose. We are notably non-evangelical people because it is a deep value that everything has a purpose, that they're living out, right? And even the animals we hunt for food, even the plants we grow for food, even, we all have a purpose that's interrelated with one another. And so it's important to really be thoughtful about folks living their purposes. Every indigenous culture I've ever intersected with also has deep teachings of humility and reciprocity. For our culture, this piece of artwork here is the twins that were born, and the bear that humans are seen as being the least. We're of the dreaming processes. We're the last to be created. We're the babies here, us humans. We're the young ones. Everybody else, no one else needs us to survive. We need everybody else to help us out to survive. And so in this piece of art, the bear was the first one to offer themselves to help these new little helpless twins live. And so just to remember that there's a lot of talk about consent, and we live in a world that's full of beings and creatures and spirits and elements that are capable of giving their consent or not to us. And so we need to act accordingly. And if we don't, it's going to show up. It's going to be a problem. Our stories also share to go with the flow. That antagonistic, excessively interfering relationships with creation will bring bad stuff. So if we are ungrateful, if we don't honor boundaries, if we don't honor responsibilities, if we get too greedy, if we take too much, if we're rude, and because remember, the earth and the elements, the animals and the plants are alive, and we live with them and we need them to help us. And so if we are rude to them and we mistreat them and we act a fool, then bad things are going to happen. I think about that sometimes with the Stuart, what you shared in the beginning about the cultures disappeared. And it always, whenever I hear that, I always wonder, and I think about, I know a Mayan family who are knowledge keepers down in Guatemala. And the man, he just passed away last year before. His name's Policarpo Chach, and he used to laugh, and he was like, haha, people always talk about how we disappeared, but we realized that the way that we were living in the cities wasn't in keeping with our instructions from the Creator. Like it wasn't how we were intended to live as balanced people. And so we went back to village life. And so folks see our civilization and are wondering what happened to our civilization. And well, to see the pinnacle of Mayan civilization, go to the village. That is the pinnacle of Mayan civilization. Is that return to village life. And also just an emphasis on generosity and sharing, not being greedy. A few more of these commonly shared principles that are encoded in stories. I share this art because all of the art pieces I'm sharing are Anishinaabe, or they're my photographs. This is Nanabosho. This is our coyote. This is our, this is our culture teacher who shows us to not get too comfortable and to not think we can predict things. We can try, we can give it a shot, but we can't ultimately predict and control things. And if we do, it will be like problems will come our way if we try to excessively predict and control. Change and chaos can be a profound teacher. So don't ever get too comfortable, and be willing to see newness and change and challenge as an opportunity. There are so many stories like that in so many of our cultures. To value and creatively respond to change and feedback, along the lines of the previous slide. Big emphasis on listening to children. One of my big passions is to that I think that we really need to deepen profoundly in our Indigenous communities, but all of our communities. I homeschooled my kids off and on, my oldest boys. And the biggest reason why I did that was to make sure that they didn't lose their capacity to engage intellectually and spiritually and creatively with the earth, and know how and remember how and to generate new knowledge from their observations of the earth, of the living earth. I didn't want them to lose that in school. And, our coming of age ceremonies, we put them out to fast. Our boys, our girls get to choose to, because of having women bodies. Anybody who's a woman-bodied person has a certain kind of power that they can tap into in that way. But all male-bodied people are deeply encouraged, and they're seen more as actualized people in the world. If they go out and they fast and they remember how to learn from their mother and they remember how to learn from creation. I really just want to underscore the power of reminding our children how to do that. And then listen to elders. There's always this talk about, Native communities. It's always about the kids and the elders. It's true. It's true, because the children are the sources of that new creativity and those new dreams that we would have never thought of. And our elders are those keepers of practice, those keepers of practice wisdom. And the best elders are able to offer their practice wisdom. While recently we wrote this out on social media, without setting the agenda for the youth. So being able to do both of that. Whoops. And listen to the land and how the land reaches you and gives you feedback all the time. Any gardeners know this, right? So generosity and reciprocity. I have loved diving into, look at me double photoing up in here. This is a picture of dear Amy Wan, who really should be the one being giving this talk, as a Tonaotam badass woman. But this is her earthen plastering the first layer on a straw bale home being built for a Tonata woman who's ready to move back to her village that she grew up in. And Amy so generously donating her time and love and smiles here. I think that it's really important to for Indigenous folks to, as we seek to rebuild our governance in our own image. And one reminder too for non-Indigenous folks is within the United States, we have had, within the US and Canada, we have a similar colonial history. We have, a lot of us have been able to keep our traditional governments that operate alongside and separate from the federal government recognized government. For some tribes, the federal, just know that there's so much work happening now to get our federally recognized governments to be expressions of our traditional governance practices. It is not easy because it's a hierarchical model that's been forced on us. And a lot of folks also don't know that we did not, Native American people did not have control over our own governments until the late 80s. And then we've had to get it tribe by tribe by tribe by tribe has managed to sort of wrest a semblance of their own governance back from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And so I think that is also a really important thing for folks to understand, to know, to know that. But a lot of our land-based governance and our clan-based governance is still deeply intact. And a lot of the work that we're doing is to place our traditional governance at the center because it is still there and emerging it to guide our lives today, even as we have these overlays of these colonial structures on top of us. That's what we're working on. That have, been practiced in the giveaway. If you go to any Native event, people will be giving away all kinds of stuff. You will be fed. You will, think the giveaway is happening. When I say the resource Ogama are leaders that arise during times of necessary leadership and fade away when the time of necessary leadership is past. That are guides for how things are harvested and how the land is cared for. I want to call out is Stephen, who said, is there any current recognition of Iroquois Confederacy principles? As folks that live in the United States, everybody should read the Iroquois, the Iroquois Articles of Confederacy. The United States government is a good try at modeling. I mean, it was based on the Iroquois Confederacy. It was based on Six Nations Haudenosaunee Confederacy. So look up the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, look up the Great Law of Peace. When all cultures make mistakes, Indigenous cultures that have sustained their connection to their people and homeland, those cultures have encoded their mistakes and have been learning from their mistakes. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy is one of them. They really built a powerful shared values model of governance. So principled, I mean, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy is still a government that is active today and actually has very direct influence on their federally recognized shadow governments. But if there should be current recognition of Iroquois Confederacy principles, because that is what the United States is based on. And if it did a better job aligning with the teachings there, I think that our democracy would be more effective for it. Deb Holland has been brilliant, and I can answer that more in a little bit. So the punchline of all of this, I'm sorry, I've totally not been tracking my time. I love this quote. This is another quote from another Anishinaabe elder collected by Leanne Simpson, that beautiful author. I'll drop her name in the chat. I'm sure that y'all have read this already, but our ancestors didn't rely on material wealth for their well-being and economic stability. They put energy into meaningful and authentic relationships. So their food security and economic security was based on how good and how resilient their relationships were. Their relationships with clans that lived nearby, with communities that lived nearby, so that in hard times, they would rely on people, not the money they saved in the bank. I think that extended to how they found meaning in life. It was the quality of those relationships, not how much they had, not how much they consumed, that was the basis of their happiness. I feel like that is the answer to what is the indigenous perspective on sustainability. Well, it's all those values I just shared with you that we're figuring out how to, we either have been applying those in practice all the time, and that we're learning how to apply them more and more and more areas of our lives as they exist today. Applying them in land back. But it's not about sustainability, it's about continuous regeneration, which is based on cultivating good relationships. I am quite sure that everything that I've just shared with you resonates, because again, this is indigenous specific, yet it is entirely not indigenous specific. I see these as very human things. A lot of the intercultural, when I say I haven't spoken in front of an indigenous audience in a while, I guess that's not true. In the last week, I've spoke on a couple of different intercultural panels where folks are really working hard to build a better world. And they recognize also that we do it through relationship building and circles of responsibility and circles of accountability. And, I love that term that we have been using, that place-based healing justice, for being able to move forward in a really profound way together. So yeah, that's that. I'm gonna click off of the share screen there. Thanks for having me, and yeah.
Well, thank you. I think David was perhaps going to invite you to take some questions. David, did you want to moderate that?
Thank you, Penelys. So does anyone have a question? You can unmute and ask.
Looks like Steve Sotkin.
Yeah.
Hi. It was really nice to hear your talk. I think a lot like you, and I'm very much alone in my own culture. And the separation of people is the big issue in my culture. And one of the instruments of separation is the Zoom process, which hardly ever allows any feedback. And so it's nice to talk to you and get a moment. There's a movie on Netflix called My Octopus Teacher. I don't know if anybody's familiar with it, but it's a man who he lives by the seashore and dives into the water every day. And he gets to know his octopus and what it's doing and how it's living. And to cut it short, one of the things that he discovers is reef intelligence. The whole ecosystem talks to itself and communicates with itself. So the octopus isn't the main thing. And when it dies, it gives itself to the reef. Mm-hmm. And I'm just amazed at our values of our society don't reach a level of wisdom. It took me 70-something years to get here, and I was crazy most of my life and perfectly happy to hot rod around and use lots of fossil fuels. But anyway, I thank you very much. It was nice talking to you, and I would like to know how to contact you later.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to drop my contact in the chat.
Someone else?
I was wondering, Penelys, this is Stephen. I was wondering, I love the storytelling you gave us tonight and immersing us in the creation stories as you know them. How do we do that with all of the people who are fighting with each other currently in our culture? How do we tell those stories? I have trouble trying to figure out how to tell a story, or even my story, to people who are not wanting to look at anybody else's story.
I feel humbled to be asked this question, but I'll answer it in the best way that I can. I think to just, you know, we live in like widening circles of influence, right? So we're like our little water drops, right, in the ocean, and everything's all connected, right? And so when I've been faced with, you know, members of my own family who, my dear white father, not trying to make it culture, I'm white too. My dear white father, who comes so profoundly from an extractive culture. I'm not going to change him. You know, I'm not going to change him. What can I do? I can acknowledge where I'm falling short and do better. I can show magic to children. I can make sure I I point out the beauty. I can make sure that I point out, you know, that I serve my part. And if I am personally in conflict, I heal. And if I can't, you know, I do my, you can do your best, right? And even at drop scale, that's wildly impacting. I mean, if you think of, you know, if you think of like, I think sometimes of a woman who has no idea to this day how profoundly she impacted me through her simple, intense, fierce kindness, you know, and determination and commitment to her people. This one woman who affected my entire outlook and has impacted any kind of change that I've ever been able to influence in my life, you know. I don't know, that I think that that's the only way that I can respond to that question.
What's her name? Is it okay to say her name?
Kathleen Hill. Yeah, nobody knows her. She's a little Paiute Klamath woman from up in Oregon. She knows. I've told her. I should go tell her again though.
If it looks like Danier's got a question.
Yeah, please.
Thanks, Stuart. Hello, Penelys. Thank you so much for everything that you shared. I wanted to ask you if you might talk a little bit more about how circles of responsibility function. That's an area I'm really interested in. If maybe that's too broad of a question, but I thought I would try it.
Yeah. On a like winding circles starting with yourself, you mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just really interested in the concept of supporting each other more, and like taking more responsibility for each other, and of course for our planet. But I'm trying to figure out ways to create that in my own life, and trying to think about what that could look like, you know, in the future, more widespread. So
from thinking outside of a tribal context, because that's kind of a specific thing, because you have your family, community, and nation, and also another thing sort of inherent in indigenous cultures, like there's whenever you see an individual person, like they are also repping their family, and they are also repping their nation, and they are all like, there's a big old heavy backpack that you have that no one sees of your circles of responsibility. And so thinking outside of the tribal context, I think about some of the circles of our my husband and my friends actually in Tucson, who have built just beautiful, profound, loving, caring sort of support networks in between our families. And spaces where people can come together to heal conflict. My husband has sort of been a part of some of the creation of those spaces of healing within these circles of families and communities. And healing some pretty intense things. And so again, like, starting with your friends, right? Starting with your friends.
Yes.
And also, recognizing, I also have to speak to boundaries as well. I think that you can be part of mutual support, and it is a profound thing to be part of mutual support for your family, for your community, for your city, right? Necessarily, we also need to recognize that you can't burn out, tap out, or sacrifice your heart and your health. I come from a community where there's a lot of struggle, also in my intimate family. I have distanced myself intentionally from. I don't allow myself to be in destructive spaces with my children, because that is my boundary. That I'm going to show up in other ways as part of that mutual support, and I'm also going to be using my privilege to buy land back with where our tribe's from, that we can have water and we can have a land base again for the future of my family. So we all have different roles, we all have different boundaries, we all have different capacities. And I think if your commitment and your heart is present in that, and to do that figuring out work, then that's profound.
Thank you very much. And I apologize for not having my video on. So thank you very much. What are mushroom cousins?
Yeah.
My daughter just asked, what are mushroom cousins? What are mushroom cousins?
What are they?
Can we name a few?
I know.
Sure.
Jessica might know if anyone would.
Ooh.
I mean, we're pretty closely related to mushrooms, so.
How so?
Well, I will probably botch the explanation. I'll just recommend that you watch Fantastic Fungi.
What are mushroom cousins?
That
was a good documentary. What are mushroom cousins,
Their kingdom is in between the plants and the animals.
And so much about them connects plants and animals in other ways too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else? Well, I want to just say thank you for sharing all that, and for being who you are, and doing what you do. It's been a real gift to know you over all these years. I'm grateful for that. And we're really lucky to have you here in our community.
I think the same thing about you, David. I've admired you for so long. I'm so grateful for you. And I'm really looking forward to meeting in person each one of you that I haven't gotten to meet yet. And yeah, thank you for letting me speak.